welcome. I'm going to show you a level that I worked on with a team project through Full Sail University with a design team. This is a project in level design, so there's no custom Unreal script programming going on just yet. That's in later projects. So here the idea was to create a basic level which I had to start. It was a basic rules, a little bit of level progression, and then a endgame sequence where you actually would defeat a boss or what have you. So here we went with like a jungle aesthetic because that's kind of the majority of the resources we had access to without actually spending a lot of time creating our own. So we went the kind of jungle theme, some basic status text that pops up via custom Kismet nodes that are set, which I can show you later. Went for like a under the mountain kind of thing, a little dungeon crawl experience, if you will. The level is relatively linear, just because making an entire explorable area was out of the scope of the project, just because it would take so long. So there are blocking volumes keeping you from exploring that river or what have you, just because the level is relatively small in that aspect. I'm gonna go up here, this little guy. Here we have a cavern sequence where you actually enter a significantly darker lighting volume, and here we teach the player about different things like triggers and within our own level mechanic here. For example, oh wow, it's actually set up too high so it doesn't kill them. The next one will, kind of thing. Did a lot of experimentation with different depth of field and camera tricks here. So it's kind of hard to see as far as to make the level look a lot bigger than it actually is. We're going to avoid that trigger because it will kill us. Now moving into the cavern, we decided to go with a jumping metagame here, which is generally frowned upon in any first-person style camera, just because filling your player position and actually jumping on platforms is relatively difficult. But since UDK allows for a super cheaty double jump, we went ahead and went with it anyways. These super magical rocks that just happen to be glowing. A fun thing we actually implemented here is we put in custom checkpoints via Kismet. So if you jump down and die into this really big cavern, which I probably will, so I'm probably going to cheat and skip this just in the interest of time. But as you can see, the linear level here leads you to the different platforms, which are different checkpoints, and we're going to go ahead and cheat. Okay, and we're cheating. So when you actually get to these points here, you will actually save your progress, so if you die, you have X amount of lives until you progress to the next area. An interesting item of note is we actually created this entire cavern via using terrain model editor, and we did a transform, and that's how you got the cavern ceiling up there. That actually took a lot of work in understanding how the terrain model editor works and the bugs associated with it, but it actually turned out to be pretty satisfying when we were done. I'm going to stop the video right here real quick, and just to make sure I don't lose frame rate, and then I will start it up again. Alright, moving on. Nice little waterfall over here, which leads down to some pretty cool effects down here in the terrain, which I actually quite like. So the player will progress through these jumping platforms. As you can kind of notice, the difficulty increases significantly. We didn't want to make it too frustrating because we didn't want the player to quit, but we did want to start them out easy and make it more difficult as they progressed. Alright, so I will stop cheating here. Oops, wrong one. I'm going to go ahead and put on God mode just so this boss doesn't kill me. And so here we used two Kismet nodes to have an actual platform. Made them pretty obvious. Custom camera mode there. And then as a reward for progressing through unarmed, that's kind of part of the story that we never really had a chance to implement, you get a gun. Alright, you've got a gun. We had a really good time actually getting the lighting in here to work, because it took us some practice to understand dominant directional lighting and dominant point lights, which these torches are. Otherwise, they don't properly give off light. But as you know, if you work in UDK, that these too many dominant lights can really mess up your rendering. So you kind of have to learn how to allocate those resources so you don't make your map over memory budget, essentially. Then you also run into problems like, for example, here, that technically should be rendering on there, but we had a lot of issues with where you actually have the light rendering. So this one actually isn't a dominant point light. We actually just have a separate light node here and just a torch going, just because we had to sacrifice some of the point lights for budget. So moving in, you're going to get a custom camera sequence here showing your end boss that's going to come kill you. We initially really wanted to have a increased in size boss, just to make it more of a boss fight, if you will. That's why we built this inner temple room to be a bit bigger, but without understanding how to use Unreal Script, which at the time we weren't working with an Unreal Script, making him bigger changed his hitboxes to something that was unacceptable for our level. So we went ahead, let me kill him real quick. He doesn't want to die. Yeah, we made him a little bit too hard. We went ahead and went with a progression mechanic, and the second boss that comes in is actually a lot tougher. If you notice, his firing rate is a little bit through the roof. To combat that and make sure the player didn't get too frustrated, we went ahead and went with a Unreal Tournament style weapon and health pickups, just because this guy would mess you up pretty good. As part of the level design, we kept the walls and the pillars so the player had a chance to kind of line of sight and block out the boss so he didn't kill him. He's not too much tougher, he just shoots really fast. So the player beats the two bosses, gets some instructional text, and they go through the portal. Here's a little endgame room, some more rewards in case we actually wanted to continue having this stream into new levels, which we actually did not end up doing that.